All right, everyone, welcome to a new episode of the Zero to Play podcast. I'm your host, Carl Leduc, and today I'm joined by Aaron Stafford. Aaron is a lead software engineer at Magic Leap, based in Florida. His previous work includes being a lead programmer at Gameloft and the technical director at Ubisoft in Canada. Today, I'll be talking to him about his journey into game development, what it's been like going from mobile to augmented reality. Also, I want to talk to him about programming as a craft and how it's evolved over the last decade and how it might change in the future. So thanks for joining me today, Aaron.
It's my pleasure, Carl. I think last time I saw you, we were sitting in a cafe in Venice in 2016 trying to solve the world's problems.
I remember that vividly, and that was awesome. So we know each other from Gameloft New Zealand. We met up a few years later when we both crossed paths in our Europe trip, and that was a real awesome spontaneous lunch. And we spoke about your side project app that you were creating, Tap for Cat, which we'll get into, and just talk about side projects in general because I think that's a really exciting topic. But yeah, no, it's and that's why I love this podcast, is because it's giving me a chance to catch up with some old friends. So yeah, first question that I have, I just want to get kind of right deep into it just to kind of set the tone for the conversation. Magic Leap. So you're currently at Magic Leap. LinkedIn says you've been there for a year and 3 months, and Magic Leap went through quite a big shift about a year ago. I know this because the Magic Leap partnership that was in New Zealand at Weta Game Shop kind of went through a big shift when they shifted from consumer-facing products to more corporate. And I'd love to know, just because you were kind of working with Magic Leap through that period, what your kind of role was and how it's shifted, and why augmented reality has kind of taken this shift in the market, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, it was a pretty crazy experience. I joined, and for a couple of months just really trying to find my feet, but I joined at the craziest time because all of a sudden we went into lockdown. And so, the studio was shut down and no one could go into the office, and we're all wondering what's going to happen in the world, right? And then we all found our feet pretty quickly working remote. Like, being in this industry, it's actually really easy to adapt. And personally, I actually like working in this manner, at least part of the time anyway. I love being in the office and riffing with people, but sometimes I just need to get some stuff done. And so I really like it. But what was it, June, I guess, the sort of infamous meeting we had. Roni, the CEO at the time, pulled us all into a meeting and read from a prepared statement, basically to say that the sales of the ML unit hadn't really gone according to plan, and we needed to change direction and restructure. And basically at the end of that meeting, you would find out if you were part of half of the company that was no longer required, or if you were going to sort of continue the journey and find out where Magic Leap's next phase was headed. So that was a pretty crazy period of time with a lot of uncertainty for a lot of us, and pretty stressful as well. And yeah, it was quite devastating. You could really feel that the soul of the company was sort of pulled out a bit. Roni was very upset. You could hear it in his voice. He was quite emotional when he sort of tried to explain this to people. And I really felt for him, because this was his passion project, like the idea of what he wanted Magic Leap to become. I think it's unfortunate that the hardware and software, predominantly probably the hardware, isn't quite where he needed it to be to fully realize his vision. And it's still probably quite a few ways off, I think, if you think about where Roni really wanted this to go. And so that happened. It was very immediate. And then Roni announced that he would be stepping back and allowing the opportunity for someone else to come in to ultimately set that new direction going forward. And so that period sort of took a few months, and it was a bit of uncertainty. We sort of had our primary mandate. We were sort of pushing forward in some general directions anyway, but the narrative that was starting to come about was that we were transitioning from a shift from a consumer product to an enterprise
Mm-hmm.
solution. And so that's different in a number of ways. Like you don't need that store, and you don't really have to maintain the developer APIs in the same manner that you would if you were trying to create a consumer facing product. But so that was the sort of direction that changed. And then Peggy came on from Microsoft as our new CEO and helped to solidify that. She was on board with this idea of chasing more of the enterprise market and leaving this old narrative behind for at least the time being. And let's all focus on this new direction. So that's kind of where it is at the moment. I'm not sure if there's anything in there that you'd be interested to dive in further to.
So was your role, because I mean your background is I suppose programming kind of covers a lot of different industries, but your experience is in gaming, and I was wondering, like, from when this whole shift happened, did you go from quite like a creative programming role to now more of a I don't know, a back-end structured building kind of systems that aren't really creative in nature? Is there anything on that, or did you kind of join Magic Leap from the beginning with quite like a set programming role with not as much creativity?
So if you talk to my boss Praveen, who you know as
Yeah.
well, we worked with him together at Gameloft, he'll probably tell you that his plan was for me to come on and do some programming. And I think that my title implies that I do some programming. But the truth is, like, I haven't really programmed full time at work for probably about 3 or 4 years now.
Wow.
I made the transition, I guess, well, as the technical director at Ubisoft, where there, I was sort of managing 20 people across 3 different projects. And so for me, programming just became this thing that I was doing as a hobby. And so I transitioned very much into the managerial side of things. And I did dabble a little bit in some of the code early on at Magic Leap, but with everything that kind of happened, it made very quickly to put me into a place where I was just managing the team.
Yep.
And so it's been, I've sort of been in that role for quite some time. So I probably need to update my LinkedIn there because I'm not really a lead programmer anymore, a bit more of an engineering manager. But anyway.
No, that's cool. So based on your perspective on the kind of, I don't know, engineers that you manage, do you see a similarity? Like, do you see a crossover from the gaming industry to an enterprise product? Do you see yourself more as a software company than kind of a creative company based on what the things that you're creating are?
Well, the people that I work with directly, so for those that don't know, at Magic Leap, I work on the team that is essentially creating the it's like a game engine, but for our platform. So we do all the rendering of the 3D content, amongst other things. And so our product, or what we develop internally at Magic Leap, and it is used by the other teams in Magic Leap to create apps. And previously with the ML1, it created an API that external developers could use to build on top of our platform, much like gameplay programmers are using an engine API to build on top of their platform. So we're making something very similar to Unreal or Unity in this regard. And because of that, the kind of people that I work with day to day are quite often, the majority of the people have all worked at games companies on game engines before. And so we share this common vocabulary when we talk about the kinds of systems that have been developed under the hood. So for us, it is extremely similar in terms of the terminology that we use. It's really just that our interaction with some of the other departments is is perhaps a little bit different, I guess, to what you might see generally in a game development studio.
Yeah, no, this is a good segue into a really interesting conversation that I think you'd have a really interesting perspective on. It's like game engines like Unreal, I feel like I'm making programming a lot easier for people like myself. I work in production, but I'm learning the blueprint system in Unreal at the moment, and just kind of seeing the potential for that. And I wonder what your thoughts are on where the future of game engines and and the kind of engines that you're building at Magic Leap, like what is the future that you envision? Do you still think that programmers will have a heavy role in producing these apps, games, products, or do you think your goal is to remove a lot of the programming need by creating tools that are a lot more consumer friendly?
It's a big topic. So I'll start with, depends where in the future you're kind of looking, but, I see a future maybe not that very far away where I open up my computer, or maybe I put my Magic Leap device on, or whatever it is, and I talk to the computer and say, hey, crack open Unity or Unreal or whatever. And what I want to do today is I want to make a game, and I want to make it like Flappy Bird. But what I want to do instead of having a bird is have like a little monkey. Okay, so please make that for me. And the art style with that monkey, like I want it hyper realistic, right? And I think at some point in the future, maybe not that far away, this is how many people will make some kind of games, is through talking with
Wow.
their devices. I don't know how far away this is, but you'll only be able to do a certain amount of things with it. It's not like, hey, create me a game that's, well, actually, now that I say this, I'm not sure if this is a good example. I was going to say, create me a game that's never been created before, because the computer would probably find that very easy. But, it would still, the computer would only really know how to do things which have kind of, it knows how to do kind of things. So, using that example of saying, hey, make it like Flappy Bird, that's a really easy example because it's very trivial just to code up and that kind of thing. So I think we're going to see a lot of that. We talk about no code, but when let's talk about no clicking with the mouse, or no clicking, interacting with the keyboard. It's like, let's have this dialogue and create something with the computer.
Totally. That's like a whole nother factor of innovation that I haven't even considered, because that could affect every industry from, it could be, it could impact the video industry. You have all these raw files and you're like, yeah, just cut this together in like a pace that feels quite dramatic, or like whatever, that that is like a whole different discussion on the future of content and creativity. And that's really interesting. Do you have
Too far? Do we need to wind it back a bit?
No, I love it. I love it. That's where we need to be talking, because I'm sure there's people out there that are working on things like this, that like GPT-3 is doing some incredible things, and some interesting businesses are coming out using the machine learning software, and it's here. I think it's fun to talk about, but I think all it takes is for one product to solve a problem in seconds that takes hours, and then everyone's going to use it. Do you have fears of AI and where that could lead in the future?
I don't know if I'm scared of it. I think with all of these technologies, we're going to find good things and we're going to find bad things, and there's going to be accidents. And I'm not scared that, I'm going to live in the world of the Terminator in, 10, 15 years. I'm fairly positive on the whole. And I think we'll work it out, but it's going to be immensely challenging. We're going to be having computers writing programs fairly soon that it just takes humans too long to understand how they actually work. And so our role is going to be attempting to, try and sign off on this software that a robot or something is created, to say, okay, this is okay for this kind of use. So there's a lot of challenges ahead, but I'm fairly optimistic. I guess, I grew up as a kid reading a whole bunch of sci-fi and waiting for these things to happen. I don't lose sleep at night thinking about some of the bad things, I guess.
That's cool. With your experience at Magic Leap, like just from your perspective, being kind of right at the ground level of an emerging industry, what problems do you think augmented reality is the best at solving? Like, I think this whole shift that happened last year is interesting in terms of a entertainment and content perspective, but in terms of problems, I think there's tons. I'd love to know where you're kind of looking.
Yeah, so for me, the killer app is when I can wear a pair of glasses and I don't need my computer monitor there anymore. So, and from a work perspective, right? So I'm sitting at my desk, I have a physical monitor. In fact, you know, at any point, like I might actually have 3 or 4 on my desk. For me, the killer app is when I don't even need those monitors anymore, and I can just put on a pair of glasses that I'm okay with wearing for 8 hours of the day. Because as soon as you reach that point, like it's a no-brainer. Like you've solved a huge problem. You've created this device, hopefully at a price point that's economically viable, and no one ever needs to buy a monitor anymore. And so that is a huge dynamic shift, which I think if you can solve that problem, you then open Pandora's box to having all kinds of crazy augmented reality experiences. You've given everybody on the planet a reason to have these. It solves a problem, and then you create this thing that you can just build on top of, and then it's just sort of game on from there, from my perspective.
What are the if you can share like the limitations with the technology at the moment that or it could be in a more broader sense of just augmented reality in general, but like what are the leaps that kind of are being made that will, because I know when I worked at Magic Leap in Wellington, I felt like one of the limits was the small LCD. The frame of view was quite small, and that was something that you kind of had to learn to look past. Like that, or is there anything else that you think is a blocker at the moment?
Yeah, so from my perspective, the two things are the price point and the weight. I think the field of view is, you know, it is or it'll be a solved problem very, very quickly. The problem is price. You need to bring it in at a price where it's affordable for the thing that you want to do. And if you're talking about replacing a monitor, well, okay, it depends a little bit on how high resolution your monitor is, but you're probably talking in the hundreds of dollars, not necessarily thousands of dollars. But the weight's probably the one thing that a lot of people probably don't consider as much, in that, you know, I was talking about a use case where you need to be able to wear these for 8 hours a day. And it's not wear these for 8 hours a day. At the end of it, you're like, oh God, think I can take that off. It's like, okay, you sort of take it off and maybe don't even notice that you've taken that off. Like it needs to really be comfortable.
And how would that, because physically, do you think that it can get to a point where it's the weight of a pair of glasses, or do you think there'll need to be like some sort of attachment system that like best case scenario needs to, for the CPU to be there to exist? Does it need
Well,
to
it's
be?
just a matter of time. I mean, these things will get down to the point of contact lenses at some point. It's just, it's how far in the future are we talking? You know, I think it could be quite a few years before we see it into you know, a pair of glasses that are comfortable enough to wear day to day. It's interesting though, because we do currently see in the market, like there's all these companies sort of springing up now that are making augmented reality glasses that do sort of look like sunglasses now, and that are much lighter. They have many limited features, like they can't do a lot of things that things like Magic Leap or HoloLens can do. And so I don't think that they're particularly useful for the use case that I'm talking about, because from what I've seen, a lot of these are not really doing much in the way of head tracking. So that's important. But yeah, I think yeah, it will be interesting. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, totally. No, it's awesome. I appreciate you sharing some of the like knowledge behind what you're doing at the moment. I kind of want to go a step back now and talk a bit more about like side projects. We spoke about Tap for Cat really briefly earlier, but this is a project that I remember you talked about during our period at Gameloft, and it was just like a silly side project, but I think that there's a lot of value in those projects, and I'd love to talk about this for a little bit. If you could explain like what are the side projects that you've created as in your kind of career, or in your life, like what are the side projects that you're most proud of, and talk a little bit about each one of them.
I mean, obviously Tap for Cat is by far the one that I'm the most proud of. Like it brings me joy Not quite on a daily basis anymore, but at the height of its popularity, it was certainly bringing me joy every day.
Yeah, well, for the
Um,
audience listening, can you explain just what's the brief of it?
yeah, I mean, so Tat for Cat, it's a metaphor of the zeitgeist, and in and it manifests itself as basically a cat drawing and sharing application experience. I think is the best way to put it. But basically, anyone that downloads the app can draw a cat and submit it, and if it gets approved, then it will go onto the site, and people can browse those cats along with all of the other cats that are there.
Totally. Is it still live on Google Play?
That's a great question. So both Google and Apple have flagged it in recent times as sort of containing some kind of malicious libpng library, and so they were threatening to withdraw it. I think they possibly already did. They also have this policy where you kind of have to keep your apps up to date, and so I haven't had a lot of opportunity to update that. But the website, you can still go to tatforcat.com. However, Google does complain about it because I haven't ever gotten around to actually putting up like a HTTPS certificate for it. So they're like, hey, just be warned, we think this might be malicious. But
Yeah, nothing malicious
I,
there.
yeah, but I am hoping if we don't get to talk more about Tat for Cat today, I just want to say that I think we reached the end of phase 1 of Tat for Cat, and I'm just sort of hoping, I don't know, maybe in the next year or two we might see phase 2 roll out.
Is phase 2 by any chance? Because I've done a lot of research recently in blockchain and NFTs, and when I was thinking of Tap for Cat, I was like, man, you could draw a cat, list that on the blockchain, someone can buy it, you could start a whole trading system with different cats, and like, has that crossed your mind? Is that phase 2?
Yeah, I think we'll have to chat more on
Yeah.
this offline, because it's like you've already predicted, or you share a similar vision here. Because I think CryptoKitties has had it too good for too long. They don't really have too much competition in the space. But like, I sort of joke a little bit about this, but one of the things I really wanted to do for Tat for Cat is that there's not really any way for an artist to say, hey, I actually made this. They can't prove it. They get no benefit out of it. Like, this thing was sort of thrown together so quickly that it really just uploads the image, and then there's no ownership other than I've kind of got it. And you know, I don't attempt to monetize this in any way because I'm acknowledging that I'm getting benefit from what other people have given me, and I've got no way to give that back. So phase 2, what I really want to do is just, go, okay, you contributed this, and make sure that those people can say, yes, I contributed this. And whether that is by some kind of NFT, like a non-fungible token or something like that, I think that would be super exciting. I wonder though if that's more phase 3, like the tokenization, and that maybe that's phase 3. But I really want to say, hey, you made this. And then the other thing that I really want to do, because it's starting to get pretty hard now, is I want the ability to someone say, hey, I like this cat. It seems trivial, we just never got around to it. Because at the moment, like, if I want to browse the ones that I really like you have to tap through all like nearly 700 of the cats just until like you find the good ones. But if you had this way where people like them, then you can just get like a your top 10 or whatever like that. So.
Yeah, no, it's cool. I think it's cool that you're aware of the space, because I think there's going to be a lot of innovation and cool projects happening over the next. I mean, just everything that I've seen in the last few weeks is crazy, and I can only imagine what kind of projects people are now working on to launch in a few months or in a year's time. So I don't think it's going to go away, because I think it's proving to be a perfect solution to a lot of I don't know, just a lot of experiences and credibility, and just ways of supporting people that you like. And yeah, so that's cool. We'll definitely talk about it offline, and I'd love to hear phase 2 and 3 once it's out. But yeah, tatforcat.com. So are there any other side projects that you've worked on that you would like to share? I just find this interesting because I'm not a programmer. I work in the gaming industry. I wish I was a programmer, and I'd love to just pick your brain as someone who grew up programming, like what that experience was like in terms of getting familiar with with programming, and if that's led to any other projects and just what those projects were.
Yeah, so I think for me, like I was looking at it the other day, like I have a repository that has something ridiculous like 50 projects in it. But from my perspective, like I felt that being able to program is kind of a skill that I wish I actually used more or made the most of it. Sometimes, like if I'm just sitting around watching TV or something, I'm like, oh man, I should really actually do something with these skills that I have. But for me, like a lot of these projects that we've talked about in the past, and you know, it's quite related to games, and I think how some ideas for games kind of happen is that for me, it's a very personal thing, and it's also a manner in which I relate to other people. So, for example, like Tap for Cat's a really great example because like that actually started. I think it was like 2010 or 2011, right? I went out for lunch with someone. So coincidentally, this person has the same birth date as me, and we have the same tattoo on our butt. And we didn't even know this until later. But anyway, I won't explain how we found out we had the same tattoo on our butt. But anyway, but what happened, like, because we were really good friends, went out for lunch one day, and we were just like, you know, iPhones were pretty new, and we were just talking about ideas about what we could sort of put onto the phone. And we were riffing, and I really can't remember who said what first. I'm just going to give credit to this other guy, and he said, you know, we can make this thing called, no, what you could do is you could tap, right, and you would see a cat, right, and you would call it Tap for Cat, and our minds were just blown. Like, this is genius. This is amazing. Because the thing back then, like games were really simple and cats were all the rage, and it's like, man, this is a manifestation for everything that's going on, right? And so we laughed about it. So I went home, and then that night, you know, in an hour or something, I like downloaded all these cat pictures and put them into an Xcode project and got them onto my device. And I took it to work the next day. I'm like, check out what I made, man. And I'm like giggling. And he's like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever, right? And for me, like that's enough. Like that kind of moment where I've put my talent to use and I've got a laugh out of someone, I've made a reaction, that kind of thing. That's where these ideas kind of come from.
Yeah.
And so actually to follow that narrative just a little bit further, because I think this is a great example of where I sort of get my inspiration and why I do any of this stuff, is Tap for Cat went from that. It sort of went into dormancy for quite some time. But when I started at Gameloft, it started all these conversations with so many people that I was just meeting for the first time. They're like, what do you do? And I would say, oh, you know, I made Tap for Cat, and show them this stupid thing that I did. And then they would laugh, right? And then they would go, oh, wouldn't it be cool if? Yeah. Right. And so it sort of evolved from that to, you know, the way that it became what it came now was that, I don't know if you remember Gregor, the loading artist.
Yeah.
He was doing this web comic, right? And I'm like, man, that's it. That's what Tap for Cat should be. It should be a web comic. So I went home and I made this web comic, which was Tap for Cat. And so you clicked on it and a cat would appear, and then you clicked on it and it said the end. And I'm like, oh, great. This is my web comic. And I was showing people and like having another laugh, right? This was great. And then in order to create that web comic, I made this little tool so you could like draw things. Like that's how you could create the content for my web comic, which I was going to do. My plan was to do further work on it, but I felt like I really just nailed the web comic from that first version. Like I couldn't think of anything better than that one. But anyway, I had this tool and I was using it to practice and draw a few cats, and I would post them. But then I was out with at lunch with, I don't know if you remember Gigi, the designer from Country Friends days. She was riffing on something that she was doing in her free time, which was doing fan art, right? And I was fairly new to the game industry at that point. I'm like, fan art, what's fan art? And she's like, well, that's when you're like a fan of something and you do your kind of art. Like it's, you know, it's like, this is my impression of what this thing could be. And I'm like, that's genius. I've got this web comic, and so I could create a fan art section for anyone that wants to draw fan art of Tap for Cat. And so I released that tool and said, hey, if you want to draw a cat, it's like it's fan art. And so that's kind of how it became a collection of cats that other people had drawn, which was super cool. But then it was like I would show people and they wouldn't understand this webcomic and the fan art And after a little while, it became obvious that that was pretty silly. So I just got rid of all of that, and it just became, you know, a collection of tapping through people's ideas. And so for me, that's kind of where I guess that inspiration experience comes from. I'm trying to work out what's the least amount of work I can do in my free time to kind of get a reaction out of somebody.
Totally.
One of the other projects that I did was it was inspired by my PhD supervisor at the time, who one day was telling us this story of it was one of the guys, von Neumann or somebody, a long time ago, used to impress his friends by rocking up to a party and solving basically with a three-sided coin, right? He would have a betting, and you would have three options to choose between. And they would say, well, how do you've only got a coin, like you can't decide three options. And he's like, well, I made a coin that allows you to have three options. And so for those that don't know how to do it, you have a coin, but the cylinder is longer, so that it has the unequal chance of landing on head, tails, or
right
on the side, right? And so this was a really interesting idea to me that really stuck in my head. I'm like, okay, well, but now that I've got this mobile device, like I can have an infinite number of solutions, right? And so what I did was, it took me like an hour or something, but I created this thing that had a couple of buttons, so you could record an option, record a second option, record a third option, record up to, I think it was like 100,000 options or something like that. And then you'd press play and it would randomly pick one of those and then give you the solution, right? And so I would show this to people as well after talking to them about this idea, and it would get quite a fun response as well. But again, you can sort of see this sort of minimal amount of effort to kind of get a reaction from somebody.
Yeah, no, I love it because they're like little tools, like little widgets that do something unique, and it's using phones in a new and creative way. And I think that's innovation. That's really cool. And I think what you said about you only spent really like an hour for that initial prototype is really important. And anyone listening that kind of is pursuing programming, if you have like an idea, to just like act on that and spend an hour just kind of putting together a rough concept that proves the concept, and then show that to people. And I think that's really important, as I was showing it to other people and getting that reaction, because I think that's motivating. It evolves the conversation, and it's cool. It's great advice. I love it. I want to point just see, is that a Tap for Cat hat that you're wearing? It is.
Yeah, I thought it was appropriate. Yeah.
So you have merch for sale now?
It's not for sale. It's fairly exclusive. I want to give mad props out at this point though, because a lot of people don't necessarily know this. Is if I just very quickly continue this Tap for Cat story. So we got past the fan art. We've got the concept now. It felt like this is what Tap for Cat should be. Gameloft got shut down. I went cruising around the South Island on holiday, wondering what I was going to do with my life. I come back to Auckland and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go off to Europe and just travel around there for a while. And I was saying goodbye to some people. And so, one of the guys that I was really good friends with there, Mosen, I'm not sure if you remember Mosen, he was there and he's like, hey man, like, so while you was gone, I was just kind of hacking away on this thing. I'm like, okay, show me what it is. And in the time I was gone, he had made Tap for Cat, the mobile app for iOS and Android.
Wow.
He was using his and his brother's game engine. And I was like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. And so I worked with him for like a couple of months to make the app version of that. And that's how that ended up into the App Store, which was super awesome. Anyway, so after that, there was, I guess, as a way to thank him, like I made some merch and I gave him like a Tap for Cat hat. And there's been a few other people that have received Tap for Cat merchandise over the years. I did actually try, this is going to sound highly inappropriate, but I think it was a good judgment call at the time. I made some Tap for Cat female underwear.
Go on.
I think that's the end of the story. I think that paints a pretty good picture for everyone. But it had the Tap for Cat logo on the front and then tapforcat.com on the back.
Nice. Oh, that's
And
cool.
I gave those away as a present to someone that was a bit of a fan. I'm fairly sure they were appreciated, but it can be a bit hard to tell.
That's cool. And like what I'm taking away from this is that game development and like app development, it doesn't have to be about making money. It doesn't have to be about being a huge global success. It could just be about some random side project that you show people, it makes people laugh, people remember it. And I think that that's okay. Like that's awesome. Like we've spent half of this conversation talking about Magic Leap and the future of augmented reality, and then the other half talking about some silly app that you've just been chipping away at, and I think that that's awesome. Like that's cool, and everyone should strive to pursue what they're interested in, and just like little side projects, because you know that's how we innovate and move forward. Um, that's cool. And I see you're wearing a Goblins of Elderstone T-shirt from
Yeah, I was hoping you'd notice that
I
actually. Yeah.
did, yeah. That's awesome. Anyone that's listening, Aaron came prepared with the merchandise to help spur conversation. But our friend Gustav has a company in Auckland called Goblins of Elderstone, Lost Goblin, and their game is called Goblins of Elderstone. Yeah, that's cool.
I look forward to you interviewing Gustav and getting an update on the project. Can we
I
make that
will.
happen?
I will. I'll send him this clip and ask him what he's doing. I wanted to ask you because I saw on your LinkedIn you had a company called Stafford Farm. Can you tell me what that was? What did you do there?
Technically, I didn't have a company called Stafford Farm, but I once had a company called Dr. Staff's Computer Stuff, which never made any money. But Stafford Farm was really just, I grew up rural, like, on like 60 acres. And my father ran a business and operated under the name of Stafford Farm.
Right.
So I created the domain and gave myself the email address and all that kind of thing. Technically, I worked for a year just sort of dabbling on his stuff, but super cool, super fun time in life, but in no way related to games, graphics.
Right. Yeah. Fair enough. That's cool. It's interesting to know. The kind of last area of the chat that I'd like to go into is more talking on any advice you have for programmers getting into the industry now, because there's like gaming is very much and technology is this huge pie now with all the different platforms from PC console to mobile to augmented reality, virtual reality, and different game engines and ways to learn. Education is like another big topic. What is your advice if you were starting off in the industry today, so that you had no programming experience or a little bit? What would be your path, or what path would you recommend for someone to take to get to where you are right now?
To get to where I am. Well, it's a little bit tricky because I think that different people certainly have different goals. They have different things that excite them. When I was at Ubisoft as the technical director there, I was in a studio that was exclusively mobile. But what I would do often is to go out to the universities to talk to them about how to get into Ubisoft. So in Canada, there's kind of this co-op program where you had to go and work for a company, but we still ended up with a bunch of CVs, and we needed a way to kind of filter those out and try and find people that we wanted to take on. And so my advice for them was to stand out from an employer point of view. It's really super helpful. The number one thing, if you could do anything that would catch my eye, it's that you have an app in the iOS or Android store, hopefully both, such that if that's on your CV, I could literally download it while I'm reading your CV, look at your app, and I would probably give you an interview just because you had that if you were coming on as a junior, because it's so rare. So many people don't go to that effort. But everything you need to do this is available. Like there's so much information on the internet. I've kind of explained how little time I spend on some things just to kind of prove a point. And I think that if you can go through the motion and make an app that does anything in particular, I would give you an interview just based on that. But the deeper you go, the better. But I also understand that, that might not be in the realm of possibility given time or money constraints or whatever it is. But anything that you can link to with regards to some code, or particularly anything that's actually running, is preferential. But in terms of what you use, I think it's really up to you. If you want to be that rendering, go into C++, go into OpenGL or whatever it is. But if you just want to make something that somebody else can access very easily on their phone, well, you probably want to do something in JavaScript with some HTML. It kind of depends a little bit on the motivation and where you want to go. But I guess that's some of my thoughts.
Yeah, no, it's a piece of advice that I hear a lot as well, is having it's not just it's like that's the next level of a showreel. Like a showreel would be like a video that shows the projects you've worked on, but something that you can actually download and play or interact with is probably a step that not a lot of people would do. Like Tap for Cat, for example, could be something that's it's silly, it doesn't really solve a problem, but it proves skills, and it proves research and caring for a project. And I think that's really important to hear from someone that has worked at AAA studios, and someone that's part of the hiring process. I think there's this big disconnection where people studying think that it's this big this big ambition that's it's going to take years, or you have to be extremely talented to get into. But I think the person on the other side that's hiring is just like you were, just 5 years in the future kind of thing. And yeah, there shouldn't be a fear to put out things that maybe aren't the greatest, but yeah, just showing that effort is key.
Yeah, you have to wear your heart on your sleeve sometimes, but I think the reward is there. I mean, depends on what it is that you create, but as long as it shows something that you're proud of, I think it's good to give it a go.
Yeah, totally. Cool. Well, that's awesome. I loved hearing your advice. I'm just kind of looking through to see if there's anything else I can pick your brain on.
I was hoping that you would ask. You seem to ask everybody sort of their opinion on, virtual reality and what's next. Where's gaming going? I was kind of hoping you'd throw that my way.
Oh, well, of course. Like all right. Yeah, you're right. What is the future of gaming, Aaron? I'd love to hear. We've still got like a good 10 minutes. This is your chance.
Oh, cool. Let's riff on that. I have to think about this. I mean, from my perspective, because I think everyone does have a bit of a different opinion, and certainly hearing some of the people that you've already had on here, it's like, oh, maybe virtual reality will be a thing one day. From my perspective, virtual reality is here. Like, this is my opinion. Like, I am so impressed now with what we have with regards to virtual reality. It's come such a long way. And I think that that's just going to continue to develop and strengthen. I don't think though that necessarily is going to cannibalize any of the other markets. I think we've developed a really strong mobile gaming, right? That it's not necessarily going away. We're seeing that consoles, got another generation that's around and it's staying again. Desktop is still a thing. Like, we've just now got this other mode of gaming, and it's so different and distinct from everything else that it's complementary. And the experiences that you can have in there are so different and profound, in my opinion. Like, I'm just blown away with it. Particularly, I think, with regards to COVID and isolation, like here in Florida, like I just feel like I've been trapped in my house for like a year. But having virtual reality, the walls that just feel like they're getting closer and closer and closer, you just go out. And I'm like, oh, wow. Like, I just feel like things aren't, I don't feel claustrophobic anymore. So from my perspective, I think that ecosystem is just going to continue to evolve and develop as well, but not cannibalize anything. I think it's just something else that people will, they'll probably like, or they don't. It's kind of like mobile games. Some people just don't play them. Some people don't play desktop games. Some people don't play console games, but we kind of all have our platform that we really like and we really want to play. And so I think that's how it kind of evolves. I still think like the streaming stuff with Stadia, I think that was a bit of a false start, but I think that will probably pick up pretty significantly in the not too distant future as well.
Yeah, no, that's definitely something to keep an eye on. What you said earlier, I think it's interesting how a lot of people lump augmented reality and virtual reality into the same kind of bubble. But I think like what you've just mentioned about virtual reality, the fact that you work at Magic Leap, I think you've just made me realize like a clear distinction about how they're solving different problems. You know, virtual reality really takes you to a different world and creates a different world, whereas augmented reality or mixed reality, however you want to call it, is more enhancing your environment. And I think, like you're saying, it's not going to replace anything. It's just that it's forming its own market, and as we see certain problems get solved, or certain games that are better in virtual reality than they are on console or mobile, like that's going to be the preferred platform to play it on. And yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. And I haven't played enough VR to like. I really want to play Half-Life Alyx. I feel like that's the game that, from what I've heard, that's the game that you should play if you want to get a good virtual reality experience. Have you had any other like virtual reality experiences that you would recommend?
Yeah, the one that I think I enjoyed the most was it's quite strange, really, but it was Walking Dead: Saints and Sinners.
Hmm.
Because I don't know if it was about timing. I'm sure it's still a really good game, but like the pandemic had kind of just started, and you go and this really strange thing because you're in this post-apocalyptic world, and you would go in, you would craft your stuff for the day, and you would kind of go out and explore the streets, and like it's this really eerie thing. Like I don't think you would get the same experience on the desktop because everything's around you and you're sort of creeping around the streets, like looking out for the zombies, like trying to work out where they are. Like you're not sure how far you can go before someone jumps out at you and attacks you. But because I think in my opinion, this was done really nicely because I think they're conscious of the fact that you still can't really. It's got the same problem as AR at the moment with the Magic Leap headset, is that you can't wear this thing for really long periods of time. So you've got to try and find that game mechanic that kind of fits into that really nice sweet spot. Maybe it's half an hour, 45 minutes for these devices. And I feel like this really met that timing quite well, that you could go in, you could craft, you could explore this area in enough time that you felt you needed and go back and kind of craft your stuff again. And for me, that was a super cool experience because I just go in every day and, do this thing. And I felt like I was progressing, and I thought that was a really good experience. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. No, thanks for sharing. I'll definitely want to check that out. That sounds like the perfect experience. Like they say, horror games are great for virtual reality, but it's not only about the jump scares. I think it's about a horror game helps immerse you into a world a lot easier because being scared and like fearful, you kind of have to accept a lot of things that are around you, and it's harder to be pulled out of those kind of environments.
Yeah, I think that genre is going to do excellently on VR. But also for me, though, the experience of, I mean, for me, it sounds a bit silly, but like just playing Beat Saber or Space Pirates was also just a really good experience for me because it was gaming in a way that I just wasn't doing otherwise, or it was physical movement that, again, like in this time period where I'm becoming increasingly sedentary, it was just the opportunity to kind of like use my arms for something a bit different and, like shoot spacecrafts that are like flying around, and really enjoyed both of those, and, spent a lot of time in those. Completely different experience, but, really quite enjoyable.
Totally. Yeah, I think game mechanics in general, just across platforms, there's still so much innovation to happen with what like first person shooters, for example, and just like holding a gun are very popular, but there's just so much more that can be done. I think VR really helps broaden the perspective of what you can do with your hands, like what your controls are, and what you can do in a game. And I'm excited for that future. Just things being innovated on to not be your typical gaming experience, to just teach you new mechanics, and I'm excited about that. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, and I really appreciate you bringing up that question, because you're right. That is an important question. And I'm glad you had some thoughts to share on that, on like the future of gaming. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time and chiming in from all the way in Florida. I hope the pandemic settles and you get your vaccine ASAP. And yeah, all the best. And I look forward to hearing Magic Leap's news whenever they decide to release the next device, and the kind of innovations that you guys are making there. So yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no worries. And thank you, Carl. Thanks for putting together this podcast. It's been really cool to listen to. I think you've had some great guests on. Personally, I love hearing, I guess I got a bit of bias, I love hearing from the Gameloft people that you've got on. I think if you made a podcast just of like old Gameloft people, where are they now? Like I would listen to that over and over again. It's super cool hearing about what everyone's up to.
Oh, totally. I'll maybe, I'm definitely in touch with a lot of old Gameloft people. So I'll maybe put together a playtest of just those for the people that want to get a nostalgia trip.
Yeah. Let me know if you want me to reach out to anyone, need to poke anyone for you.
Will do. Yeah, maybe we'll get Praveen on. We'll see. Yeah, and last question I have, though, is if anyone listening would like to get in touch with you, where's your best method of contact?
So if you're a developer, you can go to /dev/null. That's just a bit of a programmer joke.
Go for it. Yeah, I'm gonna have to look into that. I think I get it, but yeah, carry on.
But I'm not really up on my socials very much. Probably LinkedIn is probably the best way to grab my attention. There is a Tap for Cat Facebook page where I very occasionally these days post one of the more recent cats that I like and just kind of write a few comments about it. So
nice.
find me there as well.
Let's get some more cats in the Tap for Cat system. So if you're listening to this,
I'm kind of hoping, it doesn't go too viral just yet. I'd really like to get like the phase 2 stuff in first, but we'll take it as it comes.
If you're listening, don't go to tapforcat.com.
Do not. Whatever you do, go to tapforcat.com.
Yeah. No, cool. Thanks for joining, Aaron, and I wish you the best. Talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Carl. All the best. Thanks, mate.